And welcome back to another episode of the Ball Watchers podcast. I am your host, Evan Bloost, alongside my co-host, Joseph Muto. Joseph, how are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome, man. How are you?
Doing good, doing
Yeah,
good. You know, the
nice.
sun is shining again. We're getting,
Yeah.
I don't know, we're just getting tricked. You know, you think it's spring, and then it's winter again, and then it's spring, and then it's winter again. But one of these days, you know, we'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of NFL stuff. We're still in the midst of free agency. We're in the closing hours of free agency, you could say. We're going to cover kind of our favorite moves, some winners and losers, the last couple moves that we haven't really been able to talk about yet. There's a couple interesting moves, I thought, over the last
Yeah.
few days here, Joseph, but you know, we're getting close to the draft, man. It's almost time for that transition to the NFL draft. I mean, as soon as next week we could start getting into it. And I mean, it's only a month away, just about.
That's beautiful. Oh man, and I feel like most rosters are basically bolstered up. Everything happened last Monday, and now that we're simmering down, it's time to see the remaining draft needs of other teams. And I absolutely love it. We're almost there.
Yeah, there's not a lot of guys left on the market that you're really intrigued by, I wouldn't say, for the most part. And there's definitely some teams with some big needs. It was crazy. I mean, we kind of talked about it last week that it was not that it was a pretty interesting free agency period, but it all happened on the same day.
Yeah.
Like it was just all of it happened on Monday, and then it was pretty much dead.
Yeah.
Like we
It's
we
crazy.
we postponed a recording last week because
Yeah.
we wanted to like make sure we got all the stories, but I guess the Max Crosby thing was big. That was
Yeah.
good that we waited for that. But other than that, everything happened on
Nothing.
Monday. It
Yeah.
was a busy Monday in the
Mhm.
NFL, and then pretty quiet after that. But let's get into these last remaining moves. The biggest one being Kyler Murray signing with the Vikings. Obviously, he'll be making the vet minimum as the Cardinals still owe him like $36 million or
Mhm.
something. So yeah, he joins the Vikings here, joins Kevin O'Connell, and brings a little bit of competition to that quarterback room with 9.
Well, to me, like this move just signifies that the Minnesota Vikings are done with the JJ McCarthy experiment, and if they were still invested in him, they would have brought in a Kirk Cousins or a Geno Smith, a veteran guy who could create quarterback competition, but still says that JJ McCarthy's in the future. With Kyler Murray, he's still only 28 years old. You can build 5 to 10 years with this guy
That's
potentially.
crazy.
So, like, if you can I just think like the JJ McCarthy experiment is done, and I do believe that Kyler Murray both has a better floor and a better ceiling than JJ McCarthy will ever have in his entire career. So it is the right move. It's just a matter of Kyler Murray having to prove it. Like Kyler Murray's been in this position before. He's had an incredible offensive mind in Cliff Kingsbury. He's had an alpha number one in prime DeAndre Hopkins. He's had a good offense built around him, and he's only had one playoff appearance in a 6 year career with the Arizona Cardinals. So it's going to be interesting to see. I do believe that the Minnesota Vikings have upgraded at the quarterback position, that they were a quarterback away from making a Super Bowl run, and their defense is much better than whatever Kyler Murray had in Arizona in his time there. But at the same time, like, do we really trust Kyler Murray? Not as like a talented quarterback, but as a leader and a franchise quarterback. That remains to be seen. He has all the weapons, he has all the pieces around him, but it's not like he hasn't been there before. So I just want to see it. It is a very tough division in the NFC North. I have high expectations for Kyler Murray. He has all the talent in the world, and he has all the talent around them. It's just about putting it together, and that's the main question mark I have.
It's so crazy just getting or giving up on JJ McCarthy after like half a season, and I get he was terrible. There's no real denying that, but it's just I guess it's impressive, honestly. There's not
Mm-hmm.
a lot of teams who give up on their starting quarterbacks that quickly. I mean, the only other like parallel I can think of is Josh Rosen with the Cardinals
Trey
when they
Lance as well.
brought in Trey
Yeah.
Lance. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's true. When they brought in um, Kyler Murray
Yeah.
in a few years ago. But the thing with the Trey Lance one is Brock Purdy forced the 49ers' hand. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
with Josh Rosen, it was just like, this guy fucking sucks, man.
Yeah.
Like, we got to get him out of the building. And I
Mhm.
feel like that's where we're at with the Vikings, right? Like, they're just like, this guy sucks. So it's going to be interesting, in my opinion, to kind of see where we go from here because I don't know, man. There's not a lot to I don't know. I just don't know what happens with JJ McCarthy is really my biggest thing here because is this we get Kyler Murray for a year on a really cheap contract. This gives JJ McCarthy another year to kind of develop, learn about the NFL, and then we hand him the reins again in a year? Or is this Kyler Murray's our guy? We're hoping he's our guy going forward. We're going to give him a big contract at the end of next season if everything works out. And I really like Kyler Murray. I'm a big fan of him, and I think that he brings a lot of what the Vikings were lacking last season, especially just down the field. Like J.J. McCarthy was not accurate down the field at all, and I think that the biggest thing here is that Kyler Murray, I mean, you know what he can do. We've seen the highlights, what was that? The Hail Murray a couple years ago. Like, he's a guy who can get the ball deep down the field. He can work the sidelines. And he has that added ability if he is a fantastic scrambler and he is great at making plays out of structure, like a guy in the past like Russell Wilson or something like that. So I really like this move from Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings. I think that he's going to be able to do a lot with this offense going forward. I think Justin Jefferson's probably like praising God right now for this move. So I think this is great for the Vikings.
And on paper, I think they're the best team in their division. And so when you have that, like, you have to make the playoffs. And if they make a playoff push, they're not making the same mistake twice. They let Sam Darnold walk in order to give J.J. McCarthy the reins, and that's not happening twice if Kyler Murray has an awesome season. So, and if he doesn't, like, there's still a window for J.J. McCarthy, but I think it's very, very slim, and I think Kyler is going to thrive in this.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because does he get traded? Do they just keep him there as the backup till? I mean, he'll stay at least this season, I'd imagine. But down the road from there, I mean, I don't know. I could see one of these teams maybe being like, he hasn't really gotten a shot and taking a flyer like the Jets or something. If they, maybe not the Jets because they'll probably have a high pick next year. But there's teams out there that might want to take a flyer on a guy like JJ McCarthy. But it does feel like his tenure in Minnesota is over, especially because they fired the guy who drafted him in Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, who was their general manager at the time. So they don't really owe J.J. McCarthy anything in a sense there, right? At least from a front office perspective. Kevin O'Connell obviously was the coach at that point, but I don't know. I don't know if that was necessarily his decision at the end of the day. So it'll be interesting to see going forward, but I'm very excited to see this connection with Kyler Murray. I mean, he has so many weapons, which is something he hasn't had. They're going to have a run game, I think, in Minnesota as well. That offensive line's pretty solid. So, I don't know. He has all the pieces around him to completely rehabilitate his image here. And, I mean, I don't know if anyone will give him a massive contract, but at the same time, if the Colts just paid Daniel Jones like $40 million, I don't see how Kyler Murray, if all things go well, makes $40 million next season.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Couple smaller moves here. I really like this one, but Dre Greenlaw reunites with the 49ers on a one-year deal. Obviously, he's dealt with some injury issues over the last couple seasons since he tore his Achilles running onto the field at the Super Bowl, unfortunately. But he was fantastic as a 49er in the past, and I think this is a great signing in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. Low risk, high reward for the 49ers here, and that's exactly what you needed. And Fred Warner's coming off a very serious injury, so you have that backup plan in Dre Greenlaw, and they do have linebacker depth. I think Robert Saleh brought the most out of those linebackers when Fred Warner was out of the lineup. So even if Dre Greenlaw is dealing with injuries and Fred Warner is dealing with injuries, you can interchange those two guys and just bring up those backup pieces. So I mean, this 49ers defense is really nothing special. Like, you are relying on Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, and that's literally it. So bringing in depth, bringing in a guy like Dre Greenlaw, who already knows the system, who had a pretty bad year in Denver, was completely injured, but at the same time, like, you just need a guy like this who can be a leader on that defensive side of the football and just help out the offense a little bit, because all of the onus and the weight is going to be on this offense for the 49ers. If they want to have any success, they need as much help from the defense, especially with Saleh leaving the building, as they can.
Yeah, Dre Greenlaw is just one of my favorite linebackers and honestly defensive players in the league. He's just nasty and actually nasty a lot of the time. He's a bit of a talker. He'll get into arguments, altercations. We've all seen him and Big Dom in the past, but he just fits that 49ers system, and I think you're totally right. They just needed that depth at really any position because of how frequently people are injured for the 49ers, and I just really love what they've done there this offseason, and I love this move a lot because this is a guy who played at a damn near all-pro level for this franchise in the past, and if he can stay healthy, I don't see why he can't do that again. And if he's even a starting level linebacker, I think that works really well. But he's a guy who's good enough where you're playing next to Fred Warner, you look way better because he just knows exactly what he needs to do. And Fred Warner, he knows will clean up anything he misses. So I just love that tandem. We know what it looks like from previous seasons, so I'm excited about that. I don't know. A lot of other smaller signings. The 49ers also signed Christian Kirk, another solid depth receiver. Don't have much to say about that. The Bills signed C.J. Gardner-Johnson to a one-year deal, which I like a lot as well. This is a guy who's bounced around a lot the last couple seasons, but definitely has some talent, especially when he's healthy, and the Bills need whatever help they can get in their secondary.
Yeah, that defense is absolutely abysmal. And, I mean, they are building, like, they have names. They drafted Maxwell Hairston last year. Tre'Davious White actually looked really good down the stretch in the playoffs last
Cole
year.
Bishop has been really solid for them, who
Yeah,
they drafted a
for
couple
sure.
years ago.
And, like, they brought in Bradley Chubb to pair up with Greg Rousseau, and hopefully you get Ed Oliver completely healthy this year. He was dealing with a major injury last year. So just build this defensive depth. Like, you don't have Sean McDermott picking up the pieces. Joe Brady is completely committed to the offense. This offense is going to be lights out. But you just can't get in shootouts anymore in the playoffs. And I think C.J. Gardner-Johnson is really going to help play inside the box, play the last man back, and I think he's a great addition to any football team. This is a safety who fits into any defensive scheme, and he's very, very good at his job. Despite all the antics, he's a very good football player. So I love this signing.
Yeah, and I mean, the Bills also trade away Teron Johnson, who typically plays that slot role. C.J. Gardner-Johnson's a guy who is very valuable just for the fact he plays that big nickel position. So I think that kind of helps soften the blow or just adds a bit of a cushion to the fact that you lost Teron Johnson there they didn't want to pay him, but I still like that. You add some depth to the secondary. It's a solid move for a Bills team that definitely needs their defense to step up, like you said, Joseph. Dallas Goedert also re-signed with the Eagles. I just find this interesting. It's a one-year deal. I'm surprised that he didn't have a bigger market because I feel like he's shown that he can really be a pretty like a number one, number two kind of receiving option. But I also wonder what this means more for A.J. Brown than anything because you're bringing back Dallas Goedert, a guy who can definitely eat targets if he needs to and has in the past. And I don't know, man. This makes me feel like the A.J. Brown era could be over. But at the same time, they've played together for multiple years at this point.
Yeah, I really hope so for the Eagles' perspective. It's just going to be tough to trade a guy like A.J. Brown. The market is it's slim, and I don't think the Rams are actually serious contenders.
No.
I think that's just BS. And I think the Patriots are really the only true team that can really bring back A.J. Brown. Mike Vrabel has a connection with him, and he's going to be an alpha wide receiver. And if you make him like a number two, at least with the Rams, that's a recipe for disaster if you're LA. So
The Bills.
yeah, with DJ Moore, I don't think that'll fly either. But
No.
I love Dallas Goedert. I think he's such a good tight end. I think he's very underrated, and there's just so many mouths to feed in Philadelphia. But like you really haven't seen his true potential. And I think if AJ Brown leaves, like you said, you are going to see that true potential because the tush push might get banned. You never know this year, and Dallas Goedert is a beast in the red zone. So I think he's gonna eat up a ton of red zone targets. He's gonna be the number two passing target for this team. Devontae Smith's going to have a lot of pressure on him if A.J. Brown decides to leave and gets traded away. I think Dallas Goedert, just as a safety blanket, is huge for Jalen Hurts and his development, and you need all the help you can get. And I think Dallas Goedert at a cheap deal is a no-brainer for Howie Roseman.
Exactly. And I mean, I think he had like 11 touchdowns or something last year. He's underutilized from a volume perspective, but he's very valuable, I think, to what the Eagles do offensively. So I like bringing him back regardless of what happens with A.J. Brown. It's interesting, bring back another pass catcher. It could make a guy like A.J. Brown a little bit more of a guy who's, oh my God, I completely forgot the word I was saying. A little more vulnerable to trade, let's say. Expendable, that's the word I was looking for. A little bit more expendable. So it's interesting. But I do like the signing. I really like Dallas Goddard. I think he's a guy who many teams would love to
Hmm.
have on their roster, even though I guess it didn't seem like it because no one wanted to sign him. But yeah, and then lastly here, the Chiefs today traded for Justin Fields from the New York Jets. We know that Patrick Mahomes may not be back for the start of the season, but yeah, I don't know. This is a weird one for me.
I really like it, and I guess I'm still on the Justin Fields bandwagon. But when you bring in a guy like Eric Bieniemy, you need someone to like get you over the hump if Mahomes is injured and how long he's been injured for. And Justin Fields is like probably one of the best backup quarterbacks you can get on the market, and I think he's one of the best backups in the NFL just based off purely talent. And he was asked to do a ton in New York and not a lot of resources around him. I think Justin Fields with Andy Reid in the system is just going to slow the game down. It's going to be a lot of easy check down throws. I don't think Andy Reid is going to ask even Mahomes when he comes back to really gunsling the football, and especially not Justin Fields. So it's going to be completion percentage all the way up, read options with Kenneth Walker, and I think it plays beautifully to the style of Justin Fields. And I don't think he's going to be a franchise quarterback or an elite quarterback like we thought he was going to be in 2021, but he still has enough talent with his legs and a quick release to like get the football out and give it to these playmakers like Worthy and Rasheed Rice or Hollywood Brown. So I'm really looking forward to seeing Justin Fields. We don't know how long he's going to play, but this is like the best case scenario for the Kansas City Chiefs. You don't know when Mahomes is going to come back, and I think to me you got the best backup quarterback on the market.
Yeah, I like it from that perspective as well. It's also for Justin Fields a great way to rehabilitate his image here in Kansas City because I mean, we know what sitting behind these elite quarterbacks or just high-level quarterbacks can do, especially in like a really good system. I mean, look at a guy like Sam Darnold who went from being Brock Purdy's backup on the 49ers to the starter for the Vikings, 13-3 or 13-4, and then Seattle, same thing. So and won the Super Bowl with Seattle. So I think that going and being a backup for a couple of years is really something that can work for a lot of quarterbacks here, and we've seen it in the past. I mean, even a guy like Geno Smith, he had kind of that trajectory, not in the same way, but we've seen it work a lot over the last couple of years where these veterans kind of get their careers revitalized after they've gone and been a backup for a couple of years. Even Baker Mayfield kind of had that trajectory as well. So I think that this is a good thing for Justin Fields. I think he can learn a lot from Patrick Mahomes and just being in a bit more of a stable situation because there's been a lot of like dysfunction and stuff in his previous two stops with Chicago and New York. So I think being in a bit more of a stable organization could also help him grow a little bit here. And I mean, this is better than their other options if you're the Chiefs because I mean they've had Carson Wentz as a backup. I forget Chris Oladokun played a game for them last year, who I actually have no idea. I know that like I know his name from when he played, but I know literally nothing about him. So this is a guy who can at least get you hopefully over the hump for a couple games, even if you have to run a bit of a different style of offense with Justin Fields. I think that it works for the Chiefs. I mean, use his legs, run the ball a lot, and they should hopefully be able to at least survive the loss of Patrick Mahomes for the first few weeks of the season, if it comes to that. All right, let's get into our free agency winners and losers. We'll start off with the winners here, Joseph. Who you got?
All right, my number one is the Tennessee Titans, and if it weren't for their division, I would be all in on the Titans. And you know what? Maybe I still am. I believe in Cam Ward. I think Brian Dable is going to do a tremendous job with this offense, and Salah's got the defense covered. And so they bring in Wandell Robinson on a 4-year, $80 million deal, basically. And I thought that was an absolute steal for a guy who's played with Brian Dable in New York, knows how to get the best out of Wandell Robinson, and you see him as a number one wide receiver where that was a position of serious, serious need. Now you can go out with that fourth overall pick, draft one of the best defensive ends in the draft, or draft the best player in Jeremiah Love. The floor is basically theirs if you're the Tennessee Titans, depending on how the third overall pick goes. And then on the defensive side of the ball, like you trade for Jermaine Johnson, I wasn't a fan because you lost Tavondre Sweat, but you bring in John Ryan Murphy, and he completely replaces Tavondre Sweat as the number two defensive tackle with Jeffrey Simmons there. And then Alontae Taylor on the back end. Now the Titans did cut L'Jarius Sneed, but Alontae Taylor completely replaces L'Jarius Sneed on a better contract. So I think Alontae Taylor is an absolute baller. And so those were just some of the pieces that they did on the defensive side of the ball and bringing in Wandell Robinson and relying on Cam Ward and this great offensive line that they've built through the draft, I think the Tennessee Titans are for real, and they just put the cherry on top with this free agency.
Yeah, and I loved the Wandell Robinson signing. We talked about that last year, and it just takes that pressure off because it felt like before they almost had to take one of these receivers at number 4, but it really feels high to take a lot of these guys that early in the draft because, like, Carnell Tate obviously looked really impressive in college, and I think that that's definitely more important, but there are those athleticism concerns. He seems like a guy who maybe isn't a surefire top 5 pick in the NFL at least, and then you have Mekhi Lemon and Jordan Tyson, who I think are definitely first-round picks, but are, again, not top 5 picks. So take a bit of pressure off. You can choose the guy who you like at really any position at that number 4 spot. So they did a really good job just adding depth to this team, making it more competitive behind Cam Ward, who really showed a lot of flashes, especially without a number 1 wide receiver. And I think that you added a guy like Brian Dable, who's a great play caller. You have Robert Saleh, who's going to be in charge of the defense there, and they just got them pieces to, I don't know if they'll make the playoffs next year, but I think they'll at least be like a competitive team in most games. All right, next up for me, my first team is the Rams. Obviously, I'm counting the Trent McDuffie trade in this, but it still counts as free agency. They signed him to a deal. It happened pretty much during free agency, and I mean, they just got so much better. Their biggest need, they were pretty much a complete team except for that secondary, especially the cornerbacks. And what did they do? They went out and got an all-pro level cornerback and another guy in Jalen Watson who was really solid for the Chiefs, and he's on a very reasonable contract for them as well. So I think that they went out and they addressed their biggest position. They also just add depth because they didn't lose a lot of corners necessarily. They lost Kobe Durant, but he wasn't ever that good for them. But they still have that depth at corner, and they brought in 2 starting-level guys who really just make this defense that much better. And it was already a really solid defense for the most part last season. So I think they easily cemented themselves as the best team in the NFL going into next season at this point. And yeah, as a Seattle fan, I'm scared of this team right now. I think they're looking really good going into next season.
Oh yeah, for sure, and they can only get better because they kept that 13th overall
exactly.
pick, and so that might be one of those Buckeyes players, Downs or Styles. That would be electric for the Rams. But yeah, they had an incredible offseason and they just got better, and they only made like 2 major moves. Those were the only big moves, but those were the only ones that they had to make. So good for the Rams, man.
Exactly. Yeah, their offensive line maybe has some questions at this point, but it feels like McVay always pulls together a good offensive line, so I'm not super concerned about that. Joseph, who's your second team here?
My number 2 team is the Las Vegas Raiders. I was going to say the Baltimore Raiders for a second, but I think the Raiders absolutely crushed it. I think Tyler Linderbaum was, to me, one of the best free agents on the market, and you got him at a very expensive contract, but like Evan said last week, it's only a 3-year deal. It's not going to impede your long-term plans with Mendoza, Bowers, and Genty when their contracts come up. And then you bring in guys like Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker, who I think are going to be absolute ballers on this defensive side of the ball. And I think that they are just true linebackers, and you're going to bring the best out of them. So, like, at first, you were thinking we're going all in with the offense. We hired Clint Kubiak. We're going to draft Fernando Mendoza with the first overall pick. The previous 2 picks were offensive players. We'll just go all in there. But they really sustained a good defense with these 2 signings, and keeping Max Crosby never really hurts. So they would have been winners had they trade away Max Crosby. But still, even with Max Crosby on this team, I think this team can be super competitive in a very, very tough division. And who knows, 2 years down the road, they might be building a dynasty in Las Vegas. So I love what the Raiders did as a foundation piece for this free agency.
Yeah, obviously I don't think they're jumping to the point of contention or even playoff team yet, but they added pieces around Mendoza. Like, it doesn't feel like Fernando Mendoza's coming into this room and you're like, there's just nothing around him. Like, he's not set up for success. Like, they brought in a young, bright-minded head coach in Clint Kubiak. You brought him a center, which I think is huge, and a center who's one of the better ones in the NFL at that. Obviously, it was a big paycheck, but at the same time, it's only 3 years. I think it's worth it. And then on the defense, just like you said, they made those just solid moves, right? Obviously, they didn't really bring in any stars or anything like that, except maybe if you count Max Crosby, but it's really encouraging that he's staying as well. He announced that as well, that he wants to play for the Raiders. But yeah, just guys like Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, even Jalen Naylor on offense, where they're just like, they're guys who can do their job. And I think that that's a big thing that the Raiders needed. And yeah, you got better. Obviously, you're not necessarily a playoff team at this point, but you got better and you've set up a foundation that Mendoza can come into and at least like it's not going to be a lost season as it has been in the past for some of these rookie quarterbacks. My number two here is the New England Patriots. Again, another team who didn't make a lot of moves, but I just really like the moves they made. I think Romeo Dobbs, they signed to a really reasonable contract. He's not necessarily a wide receiver one, but he's one of the better guys in their building here. I like that move. I don't think it was an overpay. He's also a guy who's smaller, but he plays on the outside, and Patriots need outside receivers a lot more than need slot receivers. They have guys who can play in the slot, like a Pop Douglas. So getting a guy on the outside who I think can make plays down the field is something they needed. There's still room in the starting roster for a guy like a Kayshon Boutte or a Kyle Williams, who they drafted last year, to be those guys who take off the top of those defenses and kind of can grow. But they also added a guy like Romeo Dobbs who can really work the middle of the field effectively. So I like that move. Elijah Vera Tucker I really like as well. 3-year deal. Pretty reasonable for a guard. Obviously, there's the health concerns, but if he plays, I think this is a great move. It allows you to slide Jared Wilson into center, which is what he played in college, and I think it just makes the offensive line a bit better if he can play. And I mean, we saw how the offensive line kind of let Drake May down at the end of the season there. So I think that putting some resources into your offensive line there was a very good move for the Patriots here. And I just think they didn't overspend. They definitely had the cap room where they could have spent a lot of money, and they spent a lot of money last offseason, but it ended up being really well worth it for a guy like Milton Williams, for example. And they just didn't feel like, oh, we made the Super Bowl last year and we have this money. We need to go out and give it away. Like, they made good moves, and they still have like $40 million in cap space if they wanted to do something else, but they didn't like ruin their future by signing a bunch of guys to try to win right this instant.
You said it perfectly. That was
Thank you.
great, man. Yeah, two great signings by for Dobbs and replacing Diggs, who's a younger version, and you want to secure, a more competent wide receiver at this point in his career for Drake May. I think that's great. Elijah Vera Tucker, like you said, and yeah, man, don't spend now. Drake May's contract's coming up, and you lost to an incredible football team in the Super Bowl. So why would you change something that's already worked all year?
Exactly. And they didn't really lose anyone. They lost Caden Ellis, who is solid, but I think is definitely someone who they can replace. And yeah, I don't know. Drake May, like you said, his contract's coming up, but at the same time, it's also just like, if someone else becomes available, they have the cap space to either sign him or trade for him without having to make a bunch of random like moves and stuff. So I think it just gives them freedom down the line here, which is the most important thing for a young team where they probably won't be as good as they were this season. They probably aren't going back to the Super Bowl. I think they still have a long way to go, but they didn't overpay to try to remain in this kind of maybe sham contention window that they feel like they're in. All right, your last one here, Joseph.
Mine's the Carolina Panthers. I think that they got significantly better after already winning the division last year. Jalen Phillips, to me, was the best defensive end on the market, and that includes Trey Hendrickson in that conversation. To me, he gets paid $30 million, and if he can stay healthy, he's a top 7 to top 10 edge rusher in the National Football League to me. So I love what Jalen Phillips can bring to this defense, and I think him and Derek Brown are going to be an unstoppable duo and a force that is going to be reckoned with on these offensive lines. And then they get another elite defensive player in Devin Lloyd as the heart and soul of this defense. And I thought like the secondary was pretty good for Carolina with J.C. Horn, Trevon Morig as their safety. They just had to play a lot of zone because the defensive line wasn't getting enough pressure on the quarterback, so they had to cover for longer, and so you got to play more zone, and I don't think that's going to be the case anymore. They're going to bring disguised blitzes with Devin Lloyd. They're going to bring in Jalen Phillips off the edge with Derek Brown, maybe some twist play. So I think that there are a lot more weapons at the defensive disposal for the Carolina Panthers, and I think they are in a prime position to win the division yet again this year. And they also bring in Rashawn Walker from Green Bay as their cornerstone left tackle because Ike Ekwonu is going to be out all year against that game against the Rams and that wild card game. So, yeah, I think that the sky's the limit. I trust Bryce Young completely. I think he's an elite quarterback. They've invested so much in the offense the last couple of years. Now that you've seen the strides that Canales and Young have made, they invested more in the defense, and I think this is a recipe for an elite team within the next couple of years.
Yeah, I really like what they did this offseason. I think the Devin Lloyd contract was super good value. I mean, only like $15 million a year. He's not even the highest paid linebacker, and he was an All-Pro last year, so that's really encouraging. Jalen Phillips is obviously a huge contract, but it was just such a big need for them. You needed someone to pair with Derek Brown, and I think that adding Devin Lloyd and Jalen Phillips to a team with Derek Brown, they're going to be so much better, specifically against the run next season, because Jalen Phillips is just so physical. Derek Brown was already an elite run defender, and then you have a guy in that second level who can come downhill and make plays as well in Devin Lloyd. So I really like it from that perspective. Their defense was definitely their biggest weakness, and they addressed it, and that's really all you can ask for in free agency. And they went out there and got two of the best players that were available. And yeah, I don't know. This is really going to be the season where it's make or break for Bryce Young at this point, because there's not really anything else you can point to that's a huge flaw. And even last season, there wasn't necessarily that, especially offensively. They had all the pieces, but I think especially this season, there's nothing. This is all Bryce Young. If Bryce Young doesn't like step up to the plate here, I think that he could be gone next season. They're lucky their division's pretty terrible, though. It's not a lot of competition, I wouldn't say.
Mm-hmm.
All right, my last team here is the 49ers. Number one, the Mike Evans move. They get him for 3 years, $60 million. $20 million for a guy like Mike Evans, I think, is pretty much a pretty good steal. Yeah. Obviously, he's a bit older. You do have to worry about those hamstring injuries, but at the same time, he has been so consistent. He didn't even miss a stride. I think any game he played in last season, he was great. He takes the top off the defense. He's just a dominant alpha X wide receiver, and that's exactly what San Francisco needed. Ricky Pearsall was not living up to that, and is also a guy who I think definitely should be playing more in the slot. Brandon Ayuk is MIA. Who knows where this guy is anymore, but he's not playing for San Francisco anymore. So an alpha X wide receiver in Mike Evans, as long as he can stay healthy, just pairs perfectly with Brock Purdy, getting that ball down the field, stretching the field a bit more, which I think was a huge issue for the San Francisco 49ers team last year. And you saw that teams really were not worried about them getting vertical last season because they just stacked the box. Christian McCaffrey had like 3.5 yards per carry or something on the season. So being able to stretch the field just gives McCaffrey more room to work underneath. You also still have George Kittle and McCaffrey as elite receiving options. So I feel like Brock Purdy just has a ton of weapons. I really love the Dre Greenlaw move as well here. I think that, like I said, he's just nasty. He knows this defense. He knows how to play next to Fred Warner. And I expect him to play really well next season. I think you add some depth with Christian Kirk. They got Osa Odigizua as well in a trade this offseason, which I really like. He's just a pass-rushing defensive tackle, and we've seen those kind of players work really well. Javon Hargrave in the past for the 49ers. So I really like what they've done this offseason. I feel like they got a lot better, and they were already a good team. So I think that they're going to be they're going to be a contender next season.
Yeah, the 49ers spent money, and I think that's why they're the winner. And they didn't spend money on their own guys. Like, you see them extending their Fred Warners and their Nick Bosa's and their McCaffreys, but, like, they went from outside sources, and they got really good contracts, and they got a ton of depth. They're not relying on just Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey in this offense. It's a ton of guys. It's a ton of guys on the defensive side of the ball, especially that defensive line. Like, it's shaped up really well if Nick Bosa can come back 100%. So I love what the 49ers did. They only got better, and they were a playoff team last year and almost the 1 seed. So, yeah, I love the 49ers this year too.
Yeah, it was super competitive down the stretch in that NFC West, and I feel like two of those teams got a lot better.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the other one in a second here, but your losers, Joseph, give me your first one.
My number one loser is the Los Angeles Chargers, and we did not hear anything from them. And I think like they're relying on Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater yet again this year to be back to 100%, but those guys have been injury prone throughout their entire NFL careers. And so when that's the case, like if at least one of these guys is out for a significant period of time, who are you gonna rely on? They cut Makai Becton. Zion Johnson goes to the Cleveland Browns as a free agent, and all you did was bring in Colton Strange on that offensive line. And it's like,
They
wow,
also
this is
brought in Tyler Biadasz
okay.
from the Commanders to play
But,
center.
but like still, like I don't know. It's just like not wowing to me at all. And like this defense, I would have liked to see them bring in a lot more pieces than they did, especially when Jesse Minter, like everyone clearly knew that that was Jesse Minter's defense because there's not a lot of stars on that defensive side of the ball. So outside of Derwin James and Tui Pelotu, who are you really going to rely on that defensive side of the ball? It's going to be a big question mark. And I thought like, you have Justin Herbert. You're in LA, like you have a lot of money to spend, and they were just too conservative for my liking, and I don't really understand why.
Yeah, I don't know. I think offensive line should have been their main focus here, and they just didn't really bring anyone in that was interesting to me. And like you said, they lost those two guys. I mean, you look at this. Trevor Penning was terrible with the Saints. Cole Strange was fine for the Patriots. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's undersized. Was a first round pick for some reason, but nothing special. And then Tyler Biadasz I don't mind, but at the same time, he's like a very average level player, and I feel like you really needed to beef up the interior of that offensive line. And I think that Mekhi Becton getting cut, I don't hate. He was not good last season. Zion Johnson wasn't great either, and I can understand them not wanting to pay the money, but considering how the offensive line essentially tanked their entire season, they should have focused a lot more resources on these guys, like a guy like Rasheed Walker, who is like a fringe starter at this point and could have at least been depth for one of these guys along the offensive line. I think he has a bit of versatility to play on the inside as well, but it's just like what they didn't go after any of these like more well-known offensive line names. And yeah, you could definitely be a little concerned going into next season about that offensive line. So I can agree with you there. My first loser here obviously is Seattle. For starters, I had the Rams and the 49ers as winners, so that's not a good sign for Seattle. And I think that they lost a lot of pieces. I don't agree with a lot of their moves. I mean, most of their moves were very like low level, not a lot of money, whatever. But I think that there's a couple contracts from other teams that I saw where I'm like, why would you not sign that guy? I think that Kobe Bryant is a huge example of that. I would have 100% paid 3 years, $40 million for Kobe Bryant. Tariq Woolen, I'm fine letting walk. I think Josh Jobe is really good, and they signed him for a reasonable deal. I mean, he was playing over Tariq Woolen for chunks of last season when Woolen got benched. I also think that the Kenneth Walker contract, I'm comfortable not doing that. But at the same time, that was such an integral piece of your offense last year that you let walk, and they didn't really do anything to replace him, which I think is also a big concern. You sign Emmanuel Wilson, who I actually do like. I thought he was good when he needed to be for Green Bay last season, but at the same time, it's a significant downgrade from what Kenneth Walker gave you, and I just feel like you're again relying on a guy like Emmanuel Wilson, who's on a $2 million contract to give you the production that Kenneth Walker did until Zach Charbonnet comes back and they can split carries. So I just don't really see the vision here. I also, like I said last week, I really didn't like that Rashid Shaheed deal. Like, he just got a lot of money, and I felt that a guy like Torrey Horton, who was already in the building on a rookie contract, could have done a lot of what Shaheed did last season. Maybe not to the same level, but it seemed like a lot of money for Rashid Shaheed, who, yes, obviously improves your special teams game, but really didn't do a lot as a receiver for Seattle last season. Like, I don't know, unless they're really changing their offensive philosophy and gonna start bombing the ball down the field. I just don't know how much use he's gonna get on offense. And it felt like Torrey Horton was a big part of the offense when he was healthy and was starting to kind of emerge as a wide receiver too for Seattle last season. And he got injured, but he also was able to score a punt return touchdown. Like, I just felt like they had replacements in the building where they didn't need to go out and pay Shaheed that much money. I would have rather kept some of these other guys around.
Yeah, I don't agree with the Kenneth Walker thing just because although I do believe it's a lot of money, it's just like You did the exact same thing had you kept Kenneth Walker, which was basically nothing. Like, why wouldn't you keep at least one guy in house like a Kenneth Walker who's like, we are comfortable with everyone else walking Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen, Boye Mafe, and we just want to keep Walker. But you chose that player to be Shaheed, and that makes absolutely zero sense to me. Like when you're paying Shaheed 17 million and you let Walker walk for 15 million, like I said last week, like the math is not mathing in my
Yeah.
head. Like Kenneth Walker is your best player in terms of the free agent pool that was around Seattle. And there were a ton of free agents, and we don't expect them to retain every single player, but like you retain no one, like absolutely no one. And you're coming off a Super Bowl high where you need depth, and that's what made your defense so strong. That's what made your offense so strong. And now it's like the cupboards are looking a little bit more bare, and it's starting to get very, very concerning. And what we thought was going to be a dynasty with this defense and Mike McDonald is turning into, well, like maybe they won't make the playoffs this year. That might be a real possibility for this team, and in the span of like 1 week for us to say that is very concerning for the Seahawks.
At the very least, they are now the third worst team in their division. And
Yeah.
obviously, the NFC West is absolutely loaded right now, but it's a crazy place to be in coming off winning the Super Bowl. And I think that the other thing that bothers me about this is they had the money for some of those guys, and I'm not saying they should have gone out and spent it all, but it's not like they had to let these guys go. They chose to, and I just don't agree with the decisions. I also am a little concerned because maybe in other years, you're like, oh, we can replace him through the draft. But one, this isn't that deep of a draft. And two, the Seahawks only have 4 picks in this draft. Like, they don't even have the picks necessary to replace all these guys. So I don't know. I don't feel good about it. And especially with how good the 49ers and the Rams got this offseason, it's scaring me. All right, Joseph, who's your next loser?
My second loser is the Chiefs, and I love the Kenneth Walker signing for them. I think it is a huge upgrade and is going to make this offense tick, and they are going to do a complete 180. But at the same time, the Trent McDuffie thing really bothers me because you do not trade away your best player for the 29th overall pick and then a third rounder next year. Like that's ridiculous to me. And so I understand. And like you got rid of Jalen Watson, you got rid of Trent McDuffie just to sign Kenneth Walker, which, although very expensive for a running back, is only $15 million a year. They could have afforded to have Trent McDuffie on this team, maybe even retain Jalen Watson and kept this defense with Steve Spagnuolo there and have all his weapons at his disposal. But even if they did like want Trent McDuffie out the door so badly, you saved $33 million per year in cap and you didn't put it towards your offensive line. Like that boggles my mind. Like you weren't willing to pay Joe Tooney the money, so you trade an all pro for a fifth round pick. You have a depleted roster on this offensive line. Creed Humphrey is your only reliable option right now at center. Trey Smith was absolutely terrible last year after his big contract extension. Josh Simmons was out the entire year, and Jawan Taylor got cut, and Jawan Taylor was absolutely terrible for you over the last 3 years. So you have no one on this offensive line. And the fact that you traded away your best player because you didn't want to pay him $30 million for a corner, okay, I can live with that if you put those resources elsewhere into your number one position of need. And the fact that you didn't invest in that offensive line or even in the trenches with that defensive line and an edge presence, it's really concerning to me. So you shedded all this cap for a big time splash with Kenneth Walker. Good for you, but it's not like that big financially. It's only $15 million a year. You can allocate that resources to other places, and they just failed to do that this offseason.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying. The Trent McDuffie thing is just insane. It felt like you didn't even get the Rams' first round pick. Like it didn't seem like the greatest value for a corner. Obviously the Rams did have to pay him, but yeah, I don't know. It feels like the Chiefs are in a weird spot here where they dumped cap but then also made aggressive moves like signing Kenneth Walker. And I don't really know where they stand because you don't know when Patrick Mahomes is coming back this season. You also just don't feel like I just don't feel like this team is like great. They definitely have great players and some positions are really solid, but at the same time, they got rid of their two starting corners. Like I just don't know what you do there. They've basically backed themselves into a corner where they have to draft at least one corner in the first round, if not two. So I don't like that move. I hate when teams trade away guys just so they can draft someone at that spot. Like it basically you trade away a guy just to force yourself to make a specific move in the draft. It doesn't make sense to me. All right, my second team is the Ravens. I think that it's a pretty clear one. The Max Crosby debacle is just a really bad look if you're the Ravens, and it's pretty clear, I think, why the Ravens did this. Obviously, it was within their rights to do, but it's a pretty, like, scumbag move, especially when you knew what Max Crosby's issues were. So, I don't know. I don't like it. I think that when you look at what the Ravens did outside of that, the Trey Hendrickson deal is a lot of money. I feel like Trey Hendrickson's value was pretty much in the toilet, in my opinion. Like, I don't know. He was injured all of last season and had this very public dispute with the Bengals. Like, I feel like his value is pretty low, and you went out and gave him basically what Max Crosby was making. So I don't understand it from that perspective. It also felt like a lot of your guys got poached by the Chargers and the Giants. So they just feel like a team that has holes. They lost Tyler Linderbaum as well. Like, it just felt like they lost a lot of guys and didn't really gain a lot from the moves they made.
Yeah, I agree. I think like in theory, it is a better move to keep your first round picks and still draft Trey Hendrick or sign Trey Hendrickson, but just the manner in which they did it is just scumbagish.
Yeah.
And even still, like with that 14th overall pick, I don't know who you're gonna get. Like, there's not one guy at 14 where it's like he's gonna be on the board and he's gonna be a big time difference maker. Like, there's really no one in this draft, and so to like really be hell bent on keeping that pick is very questionable to me. So they went from like Super Bowl contenders for like 5 days, and now they're like mid. And I don't think that they're gonna have any sort of success, and they might be in the exact same position they were last year, which is sad.
Yeah, and I really like Trey Hendrickson. I think he could be really solid next season, but it's just a weird move, and it seems like a lot of money for a guy who I think you could have gone for less, to be honest. And the rest of, like, there's just no other moves they made, and it just feels like this is exactly the same offense again with the Ravens going into next season, which we know has its ups and downs and doesn't really work, on top of the fact that they also lost their center. And then defensively, it just is the same team, and we know outside of Trey Hendrickson, like, that pass rush is going to be super valuable if he can give it to you, but I don't know. It just feels like they're running back the same unit pretty much, minus some depth pieces, and they're just going to see what happens. So, I don't know. I'm not a fan.
No, me either.
All right, your last loser here, Joseph.
I'm gonna change my pick. I had the Buccaneers, but I'm gonna pick the Miami Dolphins, and I hate the Malik Willis signing. I thought Malik Willis was for sure gonna go to Arizona, and I thought that was a better spot for him. But I guess Arizona wants to tank and build a build the franchise first, and then find the franchise quarterback, which I think that's the plan for Arizona, which I really
It's
like.
responsible.
Yeah, it's responsible, and that's exactly what the Miami Dolphins should have done. They should have cut Tua, cut their losses, cut as much cap as they can. But like now, it's you sign Malik Willis, and I'm sitting here like, why didn't you just keep Tua? Like, what a waste of $25 million a year for Malik Willis, what you have to add on to the dead cap that you have to pay Tua. So it's just like that move alone was really, really dumb in my opinion, and it just like it shifts the focus for your fan base saying we are bad, we are in a very tough division between the Bills and the Patriots. We understand that, and we're just gonna wait a couple years to now like, oh, there might be new hope with Malik Willis. He had a crazy 4 game stretch last year in December. Like, what are you trying to promote to your fan base? Like, it's just it's weird vibes how they have to go through all these Green Bay players and coaches and GMs, and I just don't like the vibe in Miami, and I don't think that it's gonna be very, very bad for a very long time. And it's a signing in Malik Willis that just should not have and did not have to happen.
Yeah, and it felt like Quinn Ewers had showed enough where you give him the rope because he's already in house on a cheap deal, and then if he sucks, you can draft someone at the top of the draft next year, which is supposed to be chock full of quarterbacks. So it's a weird move. I agree. I also saw a post. I don't know if this necessarily makes them losers, but I saw a post that said that the like 5 highest paid players on the Dolphins are all just dead cap hits for guys. So that's a little. I don't think that makes them losers because most of that stuff happened long before this season. But it is crazy. It just shows that they have a long way to go before they really reach that playoff contention level again. So I don't know. Jeff Hafley has his work cut out for him as head coach there. My last loser is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, another team that was really impressive last year and made some huge strides, but they don't have a first-round pick this year, and they didn't re-sign a guy in Travis Etienne who was really, really solid for them. And that one's a bit more understandable just because they do have Bashal Tutin at running back who they did really like last year and started to give more carries, and I think could have stolen Etienne's job if it wasn't for some unfortunate timing with injuries. But at the same time, Etienne, I thought, fit this offense perfectly. He's a great receiving threat out of the backfield. He has the speed to burn you downfield in the run game. He made a ton of big plays as a runner as well, and I just thought that it made a lot more sense to keep him. Obviously, he's not a bruiser. It's hard to have him in at the goal line. I think you saw that a lot last season on those like 1-yard runs where he wasn't really able to get them over the goal line a lot of the time. But at the same time, I just think that he is better than what they had. And I think $13 million is definitely high, but I don't think it's unreasonable. And then Devin Lloyd, you lost on the other side of the ball, who there's no way you can't argue that that's an incredibly reasonable contract for Devin Lloyd. And he was fantastic for them defensively this last season. I mean, the Jaguars were wholly defensively reliant on turnovers, and Devin Lloyd got a ton of turnovers. They don't really have a guy to replace him at that position, and I mean, it's hard to replace him, but it's just weird because they drafted him in the first round. He obviously had his ups and downs with Jacksonville, but he was great last season, and I'm just really surprised they let him go, and it just felt like they didn't really make a lot of other moves to replace him. They also lost Greg Newsome, who they traded, oh my gosh, what's his name? Another corner on their team for, and they let him go to the Giants for a pretty reasonable contract. So they feel pretty thin defensively again, and they lost a guy who made a lot of plays for them on offense.
Yeah, I think the Devin Lloyd thing, you're 100% right that at that price, why not?
Yeah.
But like at the same time, like I don't know, they didn't really need much on this team. Like they were very, very good, and they lost to a great Buffalo Bills team in that game. So like you still have the pieces there. Most of the pieces are there, especially offensively. And defensively, you don't need a lot of guys. They just create a lot of turnovers for you. And I think that defensive line is still intact with Javon Walker getting better and better as the years go on. And Josh Hines Allen is still an absolute animal. So I still like where the Jacksonville Jaguars are. I think they're in a pretty good spot. I would like to see them shop Brian Thomas a little bit and invest more in the offensive line. But outside of that, like I really like where the Jaguars are still.
Yeah, I don't know. They're just like, I thought they played better than their roster, which is good and a good sign of the coaching staff. But at the same time, their roster is definitely worse than it was last year. And I don't know, man. The loss of the first-round pick, you don't know what you have with Travis Hunter. I think that bringing some of these guys back could have been a good move. So, especially Devin Lloyd. I think that's the big one for me. But they just really didn't make any moves outside of that. So I give them a loser. All right. And the last thing we're going to touch on here is our favorite signings from free agency, Joseph.
Yeah, I got Jalen Phillips to the Panthers. I think this makes them a legit threat in the NFC. I mean, they almost beat the Rams in that wild card game, and I think Jalen Phillips was honestly that missing piece. And I think he's a for real pass rusher. I'm very high on Jalen Phillips, and I think he's gonna be the next up and coming rising star at the defensive end position. So that was my favorite move, and that $30 million compared to these other contracts like Odafe Owe at 25 million, only 5 million more for Jalen Phillips, I think is a
Boye
steal.
Mafe got 20 million.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Daniil Hunter making 40. I know Daniil Hunter's the elite of the elite, but he's a lot older than Jalen Phillips, and if you're paying him 40, I think 30 for Jalen is a no-brainer. So I think that he was one of the best players on the market, and they got him at a steal price.
Yeah, I like the move. It's definitely a bit of a projection, but if he's healthy, I think he's super physical. He has that floor just because he's physical to play in the run game, play a lot of downs, and he's a really solid pass rusher. He just needs to finish, but I think he could really take a jump next season. My first move here, I mean, we've talked about this a ton. I don't really have a lot more to say, but Devin Lloyd to the Panthers. I love this move for the Panthers. This is exactly what their defense needed. They needed someone in the middle to really deter quarterbacks from throwing there, to stop running backs from running there, and just feels like a perfect fit. I think it's great value, like we talked about. 3 years, $45 million feels very reasonable to me for a guy like Devin Lloyd, who was an All-Pro last season. So I don't know. I just love this move. I think it's good value, and I think it's exactly what the Panthers needed.
Yeah, my second guy is Tyler Linderbaum to the Raiders. Also one of the best guys on the market, and like the center is the most important position, and I think that you have Ashton Genty, who is going to have a lot more holes, and Pete Carroll, he just relies on his running backs to just go beast mode, for lack of a better word, and just go up the gut and just get 30 touches and expect good productivity. But I think Kubiak is a lot different, where he puts his running backs in the best positions, and this is the exact signing to do such a thing. And I think Ashton Genty, this is going to benefit him more so than Fernando Mendoza. And I think that just allows Mendoza to breathe a little easier and not have all this pressure on him, because Ashton Genty, he might get a lower target share than he did last year, but I think the productivity is going to go way through the roof, because Linderbaum is going to get to the second level, and Genty is going to get into that secondary and just break off home run balls every single time.
Yeah, I love the signing too. It is a bit of a steep price just because he's getting paid $9 million more than the next highest paid center in Creed Humphrey. But look, if you're going to entice a guy to go there, it's a really critical piece of your offensive line. And you're just, like I said earlier, you're just building that foundation for Fernando Mendoza to come in and be in a position where there's not this dysfunction around him. And it really felt like the Raiders were just an absolute mess last year all over the field. So I think that bringing in a guy like Linderbaum, it just helps bring that stability to your offensive line. It's a guy that Mendoza can trust under center. He can get out and get moving in the run game. Like, I think it just benefits the whole team, and it was an expensive contract to give out, but they had the money, and yeah, why not? All right, my next guy here is Isaiah Likely to the Giants. I mean, we were very excited about this on last week's show, but I'm still excited, man. I mean, this contract, I think, signifies that Isaiah Likely is going to be a big weapon for this Giants team, especially in the passing game, and he's just so athletic. He's a guy who can make plays after the catch with the ball in his hands. He's a guy who's a red zone threat. I mean, we've seen what he's like. We've seen these weird plays he's had in the red zone, but just flukes, and I don't think it really speaks to him as a football player in any way, but he's just so good. He's athletic. He's a big body. He has such a big catch radius. I feel like it just gives Jackson Dart a safety blanket underneath. It takes some of that pressure and eyes off of Malik Neighbors, which I think is going to be huge for this team. And I don't know, they don't really have a lot of other receiving options, so I think that it likely is going to get a lot of target share on this roster, and I feel like it was a pretty reasonable price for a guy like that, and I'm just excited to see him in a position where he actually gets to play.
Yeah, Likely's a lot of fun. I love that guy, man. He's 6'4". He's got a big frame and
looks like a pirate kind of.
Yeah, man. He's so cool. I think he's gonna fit so seamlessly into this Giants style offense. And my last guy is Mike Evans to the 49ers, and I think just 20 million is an absolute steal. And I know the hamstring concern is a big one for a 32-year-old wide receiver, but at least they got something. And I think like the 49ers, no one expected them to make a big splash, and to me this was the best wide receiver on the open market in free agency. And I think Mike Evans just provides that boost and that boost for the 49ers offense. And Brock Purdy just says screw it and just throws it to Mike Evans. And I think that's what they're lacking in this offense. It's too technical, it's too flashy, because they're trying to make up for lack of talent. But Evans has all the talent in the world. Just go up and get the ball, big fella, and I think he's going to have a huge monster year for the 49ers at a very cheap price.
Yeah, he's going to be a red zone threat. He's going to be making plays deep down the field. He's just that prototypical X wide receiver, like I said, that the 49ers have been severely lacking for years. All right, my last guy here is Travis Etienne. I just love this move for the Saints. I think he fits Kellen Moore's offense really well. He's a great receiving threat out of the backfield. That'll be really nice for Tyler Shuck to just have someone he can rely on if he needs to get the ball out of his hands quickly. I think he's a guy with a ton of speed and makes a bunch of big plays. and I just think it's a reasonable contract. Like $13 million is expensive for running back, but it's less than Brees Hall. It's less than Kenneth Walker. Like, it fits right in that mid-range-ish of running back contracts, and I think he just really fits what the Saints need. It's just explosivity, a guy who's reliable with the ball in his hands, a reliable pass catcher, and just someone who can really just gain yardage. They just need someone here. So I love this move. I think it's a reasonable contract, and I just really like his fit on the Saints.
I think the Saints are so for real, dude. I'm so excited. And Etienne is a great running back. I heard him in an interview say it's Achan. That's how you pronounce
Achan.
it.
Oh,
Weird.
that's going to get confusing.
Yeah, that's gonna be so confusing. I'm like,
if
oh
there's
my
also
gosh.
Devon Achan.
Yeah.
It's like the same. I could see that. That kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I like it, though. Number one. Oh, Alontae Taylor left, too, so he can actually wear number one. But
Cool.
he's going to be making plays for the Saints next season for
Yes.
sure.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
All right. That does it for this episode of the Ball Watchers podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Ball Watchers Pod, and subscribe to our YouTube. We live stream every episode of the podcast over there as well at Ball Watchers. We'll be back next week with, I don't even know what we're going to talk about. We'll figure it out. The draft is coming up for the NFL, so probably that. So make sure you stay tuned next Monday for another episode, and we'll talk to you then. Stay up, Ball Watchers.